This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year and plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
For me, it's not about beating the defense. It's about learning the offense. And just embrace the chaos. Like, it's going to be a massive learning hump, but you're going to get a lot done in those 4 days.
On this in-season episode of the Coaching Coordinator Podcast, Buddy Blevins returns. He is now the co-offensive coordinator at Idaho State, and we discuss the importance of embracing chaos during camp installations. He explores the evolution of his strategies, particularly the run-and-shoot offense. Buddy emphasizes understanding the why behind plays and integrating player decision-making on the field, focusing on technique, effort, and discipline. He emphasizes winning the moment and strong team culture. Stay tuned for our Winning Edge takeaways following the episode.
This episode is brought to you by our good friends at NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. I'm sure by now you've all gotten back into your Sunday routines, but they could be even better. With NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get the most live NFL games all in one place, every game, every Sunday. And you can even watch up to 4 different games at once with multi-view, one of my favorite inventions of this decade. It's exactly what you need to catch all the action. Make your Sundays more magical. And also, YouTube TV is great. I got it this year. It's awesome. Sign up now at youtube.com/BS. Device and content restrictions apply. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games.
On today's Coaching Coordinator Podcast, we have a repeat performer. I think this is his 3rd time on the podcast now with us, and his buddy Blevins, who is now the co-offensive coordinator at Idaho State. The last time we had him on the podcast, if I remember right, was with his brother during the pandemic. And one of the concepts he and I were chatting about here before we got going was this idea of lift and climb, and something that I think has been very impactful, at least for, I shared the idea with my kids and they've certainly put it to use. I'll link that one in our show notes. But today we're going to talk about installations at the beginning of camp. We're heading towards that time where we got to start planning those things. And the idea is with install, you got to embrace the chaos. So we're going to talk about what that means. We're also going to look at the aspect of what you do during camp to build that culture and identity and attitude of your unit. So, buddy, it's great to have you back here on the podcast and great to catch up with you here. It's been a while, so I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, always good to talk with you. And we've talked a little bit about where you're at right now offensively. So before we get into some of these ideas of the install, we'd love to hear just what you've progressed to and the type of offense you're running right now.
So right now, I'll start now and kind of work backwards. Right now, we are more of a run and shoot offense. I wouldn't say it's truly like what I would say June Jones and those guys were, but a lot of different influences from the guys on staff, is specifically the head coach, who is the main offensive driver in our program. And he's got some great stuff that he's been running and that he's kind of added into it. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And that was kind of where I fit in. Is I've been running the run and shoot for the past 6 years, 5.5, 6 years. And however, my first offense that I ran was not that. I was we were pro style. We used 2 tight ends. We were 11, 12, 20, 21. We were hardly ever 10, which now is crazy to say out loud because it's predominantly 10, if not completely 10 personnel. So that was kind of where I started. And then now kind of we're here kind of in that run and shoot, very spread mindset.
Yeah, I love how offenses develop. And when you look at going back to looking at the different offenses, where they originated, how they evolve as they go to different places. I remember talking with AJ Smith, who is the offensive coordinator of the San Antonio Brahmas, and AJ's a run and shoot guy. He's also an air raid guy, and he's kind of meshed those two things together. But as we were talking, I think it might have been him and Al talking about, this is a couple of years ago, the only guy really running the true air raid offense the way it was originally designed at the time was Mike Leach at Mississippi State. So guys take things their own direction, and certainly that's what you guys have done. You have where it originated with some of the concepts of June Jones, but you guys have made it your own. And part of what becomes your own too is the way that you install it and teach it. And there's all kinds of ways of doing it. There's the 3-day install and then the repeat, and you refine over time, and there's the longer installs. And I think you got to settle on something that makes sense for you. And I think more than anything, we talked about this before we got going, is that things do not always go as you plan when you're looking at an install. And you may have run it in spring, but usually there's some changes. There's new guys coming in, freshmen. There may be changes on the roster. And so it's like you can't expect that it's always going to be, hey, here's where we finished off in spring, so we're just going to pick up where we left off. I mean, in a lot of situations, you're just going back to the beginning again.
Yeah, I wish that was the case. Like, man, we are awesome at this in the spring. Let's just keep the ball rolling. But it's almost like never the case, unfortunately. But as far as what we kind of did is for our install is we were very front heavy. And like we kind of spoke about before, was that it's kind of about embracing the chaos. You know, I try to kind of, at first, when I started installing specifically, when I first started coordinating, it was about kind of little breadcrumbs and kind of incrementally moving them along, make sure each day is as functional as possible. And there is some of that. However, I think the first couple of days, no matter what, just with, especially, you know, when you take over a new program and you're dealing with almost huge new roster, or you're dealing with all new coaches or both. And even without those, even if you're just returning guys, like there's going to be a large amount of guys mixing in, even with guys that know what's going on. And it's like, you know what, for us, we were 4 big installs to start, and we kind of lined out what those were about. I'm kind of like, these are our core concepts. How many core concepts do we have that are what we're about? And then how do we make those fit into these 4? And then let's just do it. And let's just rip the Band-Aid off. And it's not as much about, for me, and I know this is kind of something that happens in this business, is for me, it's not about beating the defense. It's about learning the offense. And I've said that, if I've said it one time, I've said it 1,000. And I'm sure if any of my former players that are now coaching listen to this, they're going to be nodding right then, because I would say that all the time. Like guys like, well, coach, what, you know, this defense is, they're running this and we don't like have a great answer. And I was like, yeah, not right now. But, like, we're just installing this to get this done. This is not game planning our defense. So we're just installing what we need to install when we need to install it, and just embrace the chaos. Like, it's going to be a massive learning hump, but you're going to get a lot done in those 4 days. And then over time, those, what you add is the next version of those. Like, okay, if I ran smash within that initial install, that's, you know, I'm going to motion to smash. Or if I motion to smash on that first one, it'll be a new motion to smash we haven't done yet. Or it'll be flipping the inside and outside, or inside or outside receiver. Or maybe you're empty and moving the running back out to run the hitch and smash. You know, or it's just a small little detail. And everyone else is actually going to get like a mental rep of like, oh, we're going to reinstall kind of this concept again, and they're seeing it again. And you're doing it earlier instead of later. There is some similarities between that A, B, and C, but it's not that. It's like, hey, let's just rip this Band-Aid off, brace the chaos, and let's get over this hump earlier so we can master things earlier.
I think you bring up an important point there. And I go back to when I was coaching college and spending the summer game planning and getting together, trying to align things with the defense. And you can't necessarily get caught up at this time of the year of servicing each other and worrying about that it's going to align and I'm going to have to do this day. You have to do what's best for your side of the ball. to keep your team learning, like you said, and moving forward. And it's easy to get caught up in, hey, let's go out and win this day today. Let's go beat our defense today. And I think sometimes you make false presumptions about where you're at because you did win a day. You may have just been able to hit them on a day when they didn't have the answers they needed to do things. So you can't get caught up in it because it doesn't provide validity for, hey, we're on the right track. I mean, you have to look at it in terms of what were we trying to accomplish and where are we at the end of the day?
Yeah, absolutely. I was at a place, I've been to a lot of places, so this won't give too much information away, but we saw they were installing quarters, so we went and installed all our quarter speeders. And it's like, well, we're going to look awesome today, but what happens when they run cover 3 and we call this quarter beater that has no 3 answer? Like when we get in a game and that happens. We kind of fabricated how good we think our offense is going to be instead of saying, hey, man, listen, we put in this concept. It's really a one high concept, but defense has quarters in. Well, that's good. Like, it's going to force us to play the play in the worst case scenario and then be able to go talk about it. So a lot of guys try to avoid that and try to kind of fudge the numbers a little bit and do that. And I don't think it's necessary. Like, you need to kind of dial your ego back. It's not about you and how well your offense is working. It's about how fast and how well are they learning and growing and figuring out what they need to do, best case and worst case scenarios in real life, like on the practice field.
Well, I think the reality is at every level, week 1, you have no film to exchange. You don't know how they've changed over the course of the off season and how they're approaching things in that next year. Again, things like you said, staff changes, personnel changes, may have revamp some things they're doing on defense, offense, whatever side of the ball it might be, that you can't predict all of those things, that you will be in those situations where I called something because I expected this. This is what they did last season. And those assumptions aren't necessarily correct anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of add to your point. When last season we had Mississippi Valley State, which is a Division I school, and they were obviously in a rebuild. And hey, man, we were Central State, who took over, was in one of the darkest spots in Division II when we took it over. So we were in the rebuild as well. And we were going to play them on national television. And they're very ironically, their defense coordinator and I coached together the last time he was a DC, but that had been like 8 years previously. So like, I knew the guy and I knew him as a coach, but I had no clue what his defense was going to be like. And we had no film from them, and for good reason. I like, what were they going to share? Right. They were a completely new staff. And I thought going through camp and just being like, all right, let's just learn our offense inside and out. And that way, whatever shows up, we're going to have an answer, And then we went out and beat a Division I school on national television doing that. They were in a rebuild, but I mean, hey man, we were physically outmatched and we made it happen anyways. And that was kind of confirmation for, okay. And that was not just us on offense. Our head coach did the same thing with our defense. And I thought that was like confirmation that we prepared our team the right way, and it worked out. It's not just that you don't have to beat the defense on Monday of camp to win the first game.
Reporting live from under my blanket, I'm Susan Curtis with Duncan at Home. Breaking news, pumpkin spice iced and hot coffees are back. I'll pass it to Mr. Curtis with his blanket for the full story.
That is so right, Susan. It's never too early to get in a spicy mood. I'm talking cinnamony goodness that's so tasty, people don't want to leave their blankets either. Back to you.
No, back to you.
All you.
The home with Dunkin' Pumpkin Spice is where you want to be.
At BlueNile.com, you can find endless ways to make your moments sparkle. From classic and timeless jewelry gifts to creating the custom engagement ring of her dreams. All at prices you won't find at a traditional jeweler. And right now, you can save up to 40% on fine jewelry and 25% on engagement ring settings during the Blue Nile Anniversary Sale, going on now. Go to BlueNile.com to shop the Blue Nile Anniversary Sale and save up to 40%. That's BlueNile.com.
I'm a big believer that the game is always played in context, and layering in situations early was always important to me. Making guys aware of kind of our thought processes that go along with play calls and when we might use them, I think is important. How do you start to work those in and get guys to understand most likely this is more of a third down call for us, or here's what we need to do in the red zone, or all the different situations that you might face? How do you work those into the course of your install in those first few weeks there, the season?
So this is two parts. This is something I started doing. A guy who had been a graduate assistant for me during COVID was at Eastern Washington. Now he's a Division II coordinator at Franklin Pierce named Zach McBride. He and I spoke about something they'd been doing at Eastern Washington and kind of breaking their plays into operating systems. And it's kind of the long way around, I guess. But what I did was last off season, okay, how do I kind of funnel these plays into these operating systems? And how do I make it more of like bigger buckets? Like we have 3 drop back operating systems. We have like a front side, back side. We have a progression. We have a vertical, right? And so same thing with the run game or the screen game, and let's fit them into these bigger buckets. So plays are a little bit different, obviously, with different reads, to an extent. But like when the quarterback is flying, like what bucket am I in? What operating system am I in, right? And with that came, okay, if we're going to do that, let's first and foremost put the intention of the play. And I think that's something that I, in the past, have done a poor job of. It's one thing to say we're going to read the safety and run double post here, but what's the intention of double post? The quarters beater, and we like it either if they're going to be flat-footed or we like it in the red zone where they have to be flat-footed. It's either going to be scheme or by area that forces the defense to be flat-footed to get this double post off. And with that being said, that kind of started, like looking backwards, it kind of started us having those conversations even during the summer when we really started installing those, in those summer voluntary meetings. So to answer your question, that was kind of the first piece, was when we started adding the intention to each play that we installed, each concept, what's the intent? Then that kind of started to make it clear which ones will start to get called when it's third and short. Which one's going to get called when, this is a rub. Okay, we're going to see a lot of man in third and short. This is clearly a third and short call. So it kind of just fell into place over time. That makes sense. Once we changed the idea of putting intentions, like what's the intent of the play? And then the second piece of that, I can't take any credit for this. I think our head coach did a really good job of this, saying kind of, I want this on this day, and hey, by day 4, be ready for this. So then that kind of also had to factor into install. Like, okay, I would love to go A, B, C, or whatever, or however you do it, depending on your school and your situation. But then all of a sudden it's like, okay, day 7, we're going to be in the goal line. So like you kind of have to get off that A, B, C path or the traditional ways to install. Cause you're like, okay, this is when I'm going to have this in, and this may not necessarily marry up with this C day, if that makes sense. So he did a really good job of that. And he liked to move the ball as well, which I think then those things kind of naturally come up. And that's kind of how we worked it in over time. And from really, I guess, the third piece, holistically, we tried to make sure that like by 7 days of practice, we were fully functional. Like we wanted to move the ball all the way up and down the field and be able to kind of do everything, even if it's not amazing. Like we may not have all our goal line stuff in, but we have like enough of the core stuff in that would have been in the goal line or could be in the goal line. Like, for example, inside zone read. Like you can run that on the goal line. Maybe not your go-to, but there's going to be a handful of game plans, just an easy short yardage spread run. Right. So as long as that's in and it's coached up, and that was kind of his idea, was we should be at this point by 7 days. And that kind of led us on those, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I've tried those before. It became popular, the 3-day install, and it seemed like a good idea, but ultimately I would hit those points where, yeah, the head coach wanted this situation this day or that, and looking at it differently. So I think really layering in those intentions, I think, is an important part of this. Players need to know the why behind things.
Mm-hmm.
We spent a lot of time teaching them the what and the how. We got to make sure they know the why.
Yeah. And one piece about the why, kind of like an American way of thinking, this is kind of a little side story, but I thought it was very interesting. I was a history major in college, and I guess there's a Prussian officer, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, who Washington had come in when they were at Valley Forge kind of the worst part of the American Revolution. And he was like a little frustrated at first because he wanted to train a group of soldiers who could then go train the rest of the Continental Army. And he was like, these Americans, they always ask why. And in Europe, we can just tell them what to do. And then he said, but however, if you tell an American why they're doing what they're doing, they're going to do it 10 times harder and more disciplined than any European soldier ever would. It's kind of like a uniquely American thing. And but most importantly is that it guides, in my opinion, not only does it like kind of answer that for their natural understanding, but when you're on the field and you don't and they, like, we aren't on the field, they are on the field, and they may get something they don't exactly haven't planned for, because the defense is going to game plan you. That's going to happen. There's almost no way to predict it. They're going to have some wrinkle that you're like, uh-oh, we didn't talk about this because it didn't exist. Didn't see one rep of this. Well, if they understand the why and the intent behind the play, they can use their judgment on the field to make it happen. And that was kind of the most important thing. It gave them that mental flexibility to accomplish the objective, right? Because they understood, what are we trying to do here? Why are we running this? Okay, this is really why. I know coach says this is my one high side and it's too high right now, but the goal of this was this. And so I'm going to kind of break the main rule to understand the why, because it's this weird look. And I think that me as a coordinator, always being conscious of that for my guys. And I've had so many quarterbacks and receivers solve problems on the field that we didn't have to talk about it, because like, coach, don't be mad. I know that this is what the rule is, but they were doing this and they kind of solved it themselves. Like, no, this is awesome. Like, you guys exactly accomplished the mission. You scored. Who cares? And you used our ideas and our whys to make it happen. So to me, that's the main goal, is that they can accomplish those things.
And really, when you look at that's something you want to be a part of your culture. And that's something else we said we would touch on here today as we're looking at the install, because an important part of how you're going to operate over the course of the year is foundational in the culture and identity, the attitude, all those things that you set and have to be something you think about every day beyond here's the things we're putting in.
Yeah. To be honest, the first meeting, I always did two things. I didn't talk anything about our offense. I just talked about our philosophy and identity as a unit, and not really as much about like, oh, we're going to throw the ball and we're going to run read routes. It's more about like, how are we going to operate as a unit? Like, how? And then the other part was we would talk about defense. We would break down coverages so we all got on the same page. So when we said, hey, this play is going to be cover 2, we all had an understanding of what we mean by cover 2 here. But the main part of this is that identity, that offensive identity piece. And, when I was younger, like when I first started coordinating, I had like, and even just coaching, like I see a lot of these D1 guys, you go to their principles page or whatever, their foundation page, and it's the first thing they present. And there's 15 freaking principles on there. And then there's another sheet on how we're going to act, and it's another 10 things. And it's like, dude, we're on the second page, and I don't remember what was on the first one. And I'm a coach. And when I was young, I would see that, and I was like, oh man, like I'm lost, and then I can't remember what our top 10 things are. I can remember 2 of them or 3 of them. And when I was a position coach, I was no different. I had all these things and I had everything lined out and all this writing. And then I realized, like, they don't remember it. You never taught it, technically. Like if they don't remember it, it doesn't exist. And so it was in 2019, I switched and I was like, we're going to do 3 things. We're going to have 3 pieces to our identity, and we're going to play using 2 ideas. Like the 3 things were technique, effort, discipline. Every successful play has all 3 elements from a single player standpoint. Like if I'm a receiver and I run a curl route at 10, and my curl route is 10 yards, right? I run at full speed and I have great technique, right? So I got my effort, I got my technique, and then my route is at 10 yards. So it's my discipline, my assignment, right? That's going to be a good play. If I subtract just 1, right? I was full speed, great technique, but I went 15 yards. I'm going to be, the quarterback's feet aren't going to time up, right? And you remove one of those 3 things, then the play, like, you're not going to win. And if you can get all 11 guys doing that, right, more times over a high percentage over an entire game, like winning doesn't become, it's not like magical fairy dust you sprinkle on it. It's math. Like you can control it. Like if you guys just do these things, right, more often than the other team, you're going to win. you do them all together, right? So it's like technique, effort, discipline. And the other part was, so it was really two pieces. It was win the moment and then technique, effort, discipline. And I like Chip Kelly's win the day thing. That was cool. I was like, man, there's a lot of pieces to a day, right? A lot of pieces. And you can't win them all. And I was trying to think of a way to keep the guys, because when you take over teams that are struggling, which as a coordinator, I've never gone somewhere with more than 2 wins, ever. And I've only been at 2 places with 2 wins. Everyone else had less. You know, so like everywhere I go, I'm going to somewhere where they don't score and there's like don't really have an offensive identity and they're trying to figure it out, right? And those teams that aren't good, their culture, they blame each other because they get outside of the moment, right? They let one moment ruin another, which ruins another, and then your drive's over, right? You're 3 and out. Like, how can we teach these guys to just stay here now? And that was where that came from. Like, let's just win the moment and give it hell with technique, effort, discipline. And if you don't win it, it's gone. You can't change it. You can't go back, but you have another one. You have another moment right there. And really, when you think about it, even a good game, that's even how practice works, right? You have to win your Indy time, your 5 minutes in this Indy drill. And you got to go win the next one. And whether they were good or bad, you still have another one coming and you got to win that one, right? And you just have to keep attacking these with that same mindset. That's kind of what we built into our culture. And to be completely honest, I think that's been something that's helped me and the offenses I've coached be successful, is that cultural piece. And that's something we kind of like put in their mind from the beginning. And then we harped on it like every day, both of those things. So as far as that goes, like that was the first thing we talked about, just to set the foundation. Because really, no matter how good your plays are, if this kid dropped a pass and he lets that affect his next play, it doesn't matter. You call double posts in quarters. See, he's already letting the last play affect this bomb he's about to get thrown. He's going to drop it. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that precedes all the plays and all the other things you put in.
Yeah, well, it's great catching up with you here for sure. I love the conversation on how all of this weaves together. And usually I start talking to coaches about the culture and other part first, but I love how you fit that in and win the moment. I think regardless of if you're a program who has been winning or you're one that's struggling through things, I mean, it is all about the moment, right? Those little building blocks, things building upon each other. And you're right. If it didn't work, we got to flush it and we got to move on to the next one.
Absolutely.
So, buddy, again, thank you for the time. Thanks for joining us again. And certainly best of luck to you and the Bengals here in 2024.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Here are winning edge takeaways and ideas for implementation. 1. Embrace the chaos during installations. Following Coach Blevins' advice, we need to remember to embrace the chaos. Instead of focusing on perfect execution early on, prioritize learning and mastering the offense. Understand that initial practices will be messy, but this approach allows players to absorb the core concepts and adapt more quickly as the season progresses. This is about the long haul, so don't get caught up in the results of day one or week one, etc. Embrace the process. 2. Understand the why behind each play. Players need to grasp the intent behind every play, not just the mechanics. By understanding the purpose of a play, players can make better decisions on the field, especially when faced with unexpected defensive looks. This understanding creates the adaptability you need on game day and empowers your players to solve problems during the game. And 3, build a strong cultural foundation. You want to spend a lot of time establishing that clear cultural identity so that your team is successful when it's time to hit game day. On the offensive side, Coach Blevins builds their culture on 3 key elements: technique, effort, and discipline, and they're ingrained in every practice and game scenario. His mindset of winning the moment helps players to focus on succeeding in the present without dwelling on past mistakes, which obviously helps maintain focus and resilience throughout the game and the season. Be sure to visit coachandcoordinator.com and check out the 10% Toolkit, which highlights our partners and some of the offers they have to you as a listener. The link to that is in the show notes. Follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com and follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.